On a cool Wednesday afternoon in Midrand, the quiet hum of traffic was interrupted by the flashing lights of tactical police units. At the centre of their attention sat Vusimusi Matlala, a man whose name often came up in regards to tenders, allegations of fraud, and a trail of bloodied streets. By the time the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, the story was already spiralling into something larger than one failed assassination attempt. Matlala, the tender king with a taste for luxury, stood accused of something far darker than inflated contracts or irregular paperwork. The state claims he orchestrated a botched hit on actress and socialite Tebogo Thobejane, his former lover. In October of 2023, outside a Bryanston nightclub, automatic rifle fire tore through the night. Tebogo survived, but the young woman beside her did not walk away. A bullet tore into her spine, leaving her permanently paralyzed, her future reduced to the confines of a wheelchair. To the state, she was nothing more than collateral in what they now call an act of calculated revenge. The arrest came just months after Vusi's company, Medicare 24 Tshwane district, secured a 360 million rand deal from the South African Police Service. The irony is impossible to ignore. While auditors flagged the tender as irregular, while whispers of fronting and fraud filled the corridors of power, the man meant to supply health screening for nearly 180,000 officers was allegedly plotting to end a woman's life. Detectives pursuing Vusi were not chasing shadows. Their net had been tightening ever since blood stained the pavements of Vereeniging. In April of the previous year, engineer Armand Swart was ambushed outside his office and cut down in a hail of bullets. At first glance, it looked like an execution, the silencing of a whistleblower who had uncovered price inflation of more than 4,000% on Transnet freight rail contracts. But investigators would later whisper a darker irony. Swart had not even been the intended target. The hitmen had taken the wrong man. And the whistleblower who had truly unsettled the powerful still walked the same corridors of that firm, alive but marked. Within hours, the police swooped in, arresting 3 alleged hitmen. Among them a serving South African Police Service detective, Michael Puletau, whose badge and weapon should have stood for law, not lawlessness. Beside him were Floyd Mabusela and Musa Kakana, both accused of operating as lethal professionals. With Michael Tau, the irony cut deep. A veteran detective sworn to protect, now accused of betraying the very system and people he served. The investigation into Swart's killing became the thread that unravelled Matlala's alleged empire of violence. It was the same men, Mabusela and Kakana, who would later be linked to the attempted murder of the famous actress. Prosecutors argue that Vusimusi paid them as much as 120,000 rand for the job. Vusimusi insists that the payment was innocent, a gesture to help with funeral costs for the family of a different woman he was romantically involved with. To investigators, it was blood money disguised as compassion. As the case widened, the detectives found themselves in the crosshairs. Death threats followed, and only the special task force now stands between them and an early grave. Even within the ranks of the police, resistance has brewed. High-ranking officers have tried to stall the work, but still, the evidence has accumulated. Wire transfers, communications, and testimony pile up like pieces of a puzzle too damning to ignore. For the intended target of the botched hit, survival came at the cost of peace. She has written letters to the highest offices in the land, pleading for protection. She told of a son in depression, of a career collapsing, of living like a prisoner in her own country, while her alleged persecutor flaunted luxury cars and properties. "Are we waiting for me to die before justice is served?" she asked, the words cutting sharper than any bullet. That question now hangs over Vusi as he sits in a high-risk cell in central Pretoria. From tender millionaire to inmate, his fall is not simply personal. It shines a harsh light on the cracks in the state, on how contracts worth billions can be siphoned into the hands of men who operate like shadow bosses, both in boardrooms and in alleys soaked with blood. This was not Kat's first encounter with scandal. His name surfaced in the vast and tangled web of Tembisa hospital contracts, a scheme so brazen that it triggered a special investigating unit probe. Through obscure companies with names like Black AK Trading and Core Kabeng, he allegedly supplied fake bid documents and siphoned millions. Whistleblower Babita Deokaran flagged the irregularities. 3 weeks later, she was dead, gunned down outside her home. The payments she tried to stop were released soon after her killing. The tenders linked to Matlala's companies ran into the hundreds of millions. News investigations revealed nearly 5 million rand flowing into his accounts in a single month. 2 shell firms, created within a day of one another, traced back to a house in Mamelodi East. Their only real product was paper, reams of forged documents that propped up an illusion of legitimacy. Yet despite the SIU recommending prosecution, despite the clouds gathering over him, Matlala continued to receive state contracts. By January of this year, calls to cancel his police health contract grew louder. Internal auditors warned of fraud, but as the process dragged, police officers watched their supposed service provider turn into the accused in a conspiracy to kill. The man entrusted to safeguard their health was, according to investigators, handing out cash for death. The raids on his security companies only deepened the shadows. Police stormed his premises, confiscating evidence, leaving behind confusion and claims of illegality. His spokesperson protested that no warrants were shown, that accusations shifted from kidnapping to corruption to assassination. To his defenders, he is a victim of political games. To prosecutors, he is the spider in the web. But the story of Kat Matlala did not end at the gates of his raided security company. In fact, the deeper investigators dug, the more his life resembled the inner workings of a criminal syndicate that had wormed its way into the highest levels of the South African state. Leaked phone records revealed that on the 9th of May, just days before Kat's dramatic arrest, a former police minister placed no fewer than 10 calls to his private cell phone, calls Kat ignored. The silence spoke louder than words, igniting speculation that the minister himself was attempting to shield an old ally from the storm that was closing in. It was not the first time the two men's names had brushed together. Kat, always eager to showcase his wealth, had reportedly hosted the former police minister in a lavish penthouse, an arrangement the minister later dismissed as nothing more than friendly acquaintance. But to critics, the optics were poison. Why was a minister of police entangled, however loosely, with a man accused of hiring killers? The suspicions grew darker when Lieutenant General Mwanazi, the hard-bitten KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner, accused Matlala of being the hub of a criminal wheel spinning far beyond one attempted hit. In a leaked dossier, Mkhwanazi alleged that Matlala bankrolled political galas, funded campaigns, and lubricated the careers of powerful men. More than 120 criminal dockets, ranging from fraud to illegal firearms, appeared to have vanished or stalled whenever his name surfaced. The insinuation was chilling. Matlala was not just buying luxury cars and Rolex watches, he was buying silence. During raids on his properties, investigators uncovered unlicensed firearms, high-end timepieces worth more than 200,000 rand, and links to his sprawling private security empire, Cat VIP Protection. Ostensibly, these companies offered bodyguard services and executive protection. In reality, critics suggested they acted as an unofficial armed wing for a businessman with ambitions that blurred the line between tenderpreneur and mob boss. To his clients, he was a protector. To his enemies, he was a man who could conjure violence at will. The deeper one traced his paper trail, the more it resembled a labyrinth of front companies and cross-border deals. Medicare 24 on its face was a healthcare service provider, yet the man who owned it was simultaneously directing Black AK Trading and Core Kabeng, entities implicated in the infamous Tembisa hospital scandal. To Mkhwanazi and his allies, this was no coincidence. This was structure, a syndicate cloaked in legitimacy, spreading across sectors from medical tenders to private security, with politicians and senior police officers stitched in as guarantors of protection. And then there was the timing. Each time pressure mounted, each time a whistleblower like Babita Deokaran flagged irregularities or a journalist tracked suspicious payments, something intervened. Dockets disappeared, cases stalled, contracts continued. Seen in this light, the botched hit on Tebogo Thobejane was not an isolated crime of passion, but the natural extension of a man accustomed to allegedly resolving disputes with money, muscle, or murder. Her survival was an anomaly in a pattern where problems tended to vanish. Her public accusations disrupted the quiet balance he had built, drawing cameras, ministers, and prosecutors into a game he preferred to play in the shadows. The political ties added a sinister weight to her fears. When Thobejane wrote to the National Prosecuting Authority and Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, pleading that her tormentor remained free because of wealth and influence, she was not speaking from paranoia. She was describing a landscape in which her alleged persecutor had already shown the ability to bend institutions around himself. For the detectives, this backdrop meant every move was made under threat. To investigate Matlala was to challenge the networks that protected him. Death threats followed them. Special task force operatives were assigned as bodyguards, and whispers of high-ranking interference dogged their case files. Each step forward felt like stepping onto unstable ground, where allies could turn and information could leak. To tell the story of Kat Matlala without the shadow of political influence would be to strip away the most dangerous truth of all. He was not merely a businessman who fell to greed. He was the embodiment of a system where tenders became bank accounts for the powerful, where ministers placed desperate phone calls, and where contracts worth hundreds of millions turned into lifelines for men who considered themselves untouchable. Now, Matlala's world has shrunk to a cell, his luxury cars replaced by concrete walls and heavy doors. His trial looms, with prosecutors preparing to lay out a chain of events linking tenders, fraud, and murder for hire. At its heart stands a man who once dined with ministers and signed contracts worth hundreds of millions, and a woman who refuses to stop asking why justice for her has been so long delayed. The story of Kat Matlala is not simply about one man's greed. It is about how power bends justice, how contracts become conduits for corruption, and how the line between boardroom and underworld is sometimes no line at all. It is a tale of money turning into bullets, of whispered deals echoing as gunfire in the night, and it asks a chilling question: how many lives does one man get to gamble with before his own luck finally runs out?
This scandal is one of power, betrayal, and violence spilling from boardrooms into back streets. What began as whispers of contracts and kickbacks ended with bullets, paralysis, and allegations that even those sworn to uphold the law were pulling the trigger. But what do you think? Was Matlala the true mastermind, or just another player in a ruthless game where loyalty is a myth and revenge is currency? If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who follows South Africa's crime underworld, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next case we uncover.